worth more than your own soul?
I guess I need to think about this. How can rest come from a cross?
Romans 12, 1 and 2. And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all that He has done for you.
Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind He will find acceptable.
This is truly the way to worship Him.
Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think.
And then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect.
Lord God, your ways truly are not our ways. So please help us to understand. Open our hearts to receive, our minds to know, our wills to choose. That all of our hearts are may experience the life that you created us to receive. The life that you died for us to receive. The life that you rose from the dead for us to live in. And the life that one day we will fully and completely know. Thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I'll get my legs together to do that. Rest, cross. Oftentimes, the most common time I quote from Matthew 11, 28 to 30, is usually when someone is dying. And they are just at the end of their life, and they're just waiting for that to happen. And I read it to them as an invitation to just rest. So it's kind of easy for them then to receive the cross because there's not much life left to live, right? They just are usually having to submit to what they had before them. But when we read the text, those of us who are young and full of vim and vigor, right, Casey?
No.
Yeah. And then we bring this whole cross passage together. I often sometimes think, how do these come together? How do these work it out? And, oh great, that's going to be the wrong one. I'll get to that in a second. And what I come to is the phrase from both of these texts where Jesus says, "Let me teach you," and then "your life for my sake." And there's two texts, in a sense, I feel like come together in Romans 12, 1 and 2. And so, it is my commitment today to get through this verse, these two verses that we've been on for 3 weeks. And then I will go away for 3 weeks or 2.5 weeks or whatever it is. And then I will come back and we will jump back in. But I have become convinced of one thing, more than anything else, and especially this last week again, how important the mind is in our faith journey. And why Paul puts it at such an important part in terms of what needs to happen from our end in order to experience the rest and the life that God invites us to, but also to understand the cross that he calls us to. So, we are going to very simply read these two verses. It should take about a minute or two, and then we'll be done. Good. Here we go. I've been reading them already for 2 weeks, but I'm going to just make a couple more comments. Listen, for those of you who are visiting, Paul in Romans 1 to 11 has been arguing and showing how God's faithfulness to the people of Israel, to the world, to his desire to deal with sin and to bring his blessing to this world has been consistent throughout all of history. And that Israel's task was fulfilled in the person of Jesus Christ as he was on the cross, bearing the sins of this world. And now, through Jesus Christ, through his resurrection, through the Spirit of God who's come upon us, in this new covenant that we have, there is a new people made up of Jew and Gentile. And it sounds wonderful until you try to get Jew and Gentile together. And then you realize, maybe not so much. And that was some of the challenge. And so Paul has just spent all this time speaking to the Jews, speaking to the Gentiles, and helping them understand, hey, you guys think you're Jews? You think you're pretty special? Well, you are, but... And to the Gentiles, you guys think you're really special because you're free of all this religious stuff, and you think you don't need any of that Jewish stuff, and you think you're pretty special. But you are, but you're not. And now Paul is coming to how do we work this out? So he says, therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, sisters and brothers, by account or on account of the mercies of God. Question. What are the mercies of God? Let's think of it in terms of the book so far. Just if anyone knows something of the book of Romans, what kind of mercies has been demonstrated to so far in the book of Romans? Repeated forgiveness, right? Yeah. Story of Israel is screw up, forgiven. Screw up, forgiven. Okay, good. What else?
Gentiles being grafted in.
Yeah. So the Gentiles receive mercy from God by being grafted in. And really, from a large picture, that is, in some ways, the mercies of God. That God has taken the nation of Israel that has so repeatedly and persistently rebelled against him and brought them in to be his people through Jesus Christ. And then that God's mercy has been enacted to the Gentiles so that they too under Christ have been brought in to be his people as well. But the mercies of God, of course, don't end there, do they? Because they come down to roost in our lives. And as we had opportunity this morning to confess sin, to confess the things that we have done, to confess the things we haven't done, that we should have done, we are really declaring, God, you are so merciful. Oh Lord, if I truly knew this past week all the different ways that I have not lived as you have called me to live. And yet, your love and your mercy and your compassion is new every morning. And this is really the foundation. This is what we continually come back to. Time and time and time again. Every day, every moment, every Sunday, every communion, we come back and we say, thank you for your mercies. This is what we need to hold on to above all else. Because if we don't, what happens? If we don't hold on to the mercies of God in our lives, Jean,
We fall away
we fall away. How is that expressed?
in sin
Sin
in our lives.
in our lives, yeah.
Hopelessness too.
Sorry?
Hopelessness.
Hopelessness. How is it, sorry, Chris?
Apathy.
Apathy. How is it expressed in the church?
Fear.
Fear is one, yeah. What's an ugly one that is?
Legalism.
Legalism, right?
Pride.
I am better than you. Sorry, you're just at the front, Elizabeth. And because you, the first thing you know is pick your nose. Sorry, I don't know why. And I don't. That's pretty benign. And so I make myself feel better, right? And so I'm resting on what I can do versus better than you can, or I do that you don't, or whatever it is. And sorry, someone else said something else here? Disunity. Yeah. Yeah, because it creates separation, right? All of a sudden, I'm comparing. So, the mercies of God are fundamental. One of the things I seek to do, as I've encountered various people from, well, actually anyone, and anyone I enter into an indeed significant conversation about, okay, fine, as the conversation enters in, they find out I'm a follower of Jesus or a Christian, and then they find out I'm a pastor, so that's even worse. I will make it clear fairly early on that, you know what? I am as much in need of God's mercy as you. And I've said that to drug addicts, alcoholics, anyone, and religious zealots. We are all in need of God's mercy. Every single day. And as we rest here, as we plant ourselves here firmly and completely, then we can go forward. And as we are captured by God's mercy, then it is suddenly much easier to understand the cross part, the part of presenting our bodies. And by the way, let me just say here, the mercies of God really are where the rest part comes in, aren't they? You think of the encounters Jesus had with various people. The people who were drawn to Jesus were the sinners, the prostitutes, the people who were cast out by society. Why were they drawn to him? Because he welcomed them, he accepted them. And in that they found a rest. Jesus, though, always then invited them to present their bodies, right? Go and sin no more, he would often say with them. In other words, there was always still that rest that God gave us. And the thing about God's mercies is they come to all of us, don't they? Even if you don't believe in God, God's mercies comes to us. In fact, I had one this week, actually. Someone who doesn't believe in God, and yet they acknowledged that they had encountered something merciful in their life. They didn't get attached to God, but I did. And that's fine. But there's a sense in which we all receive the mercies of God. But God's mercy does not automatically produce the obedience that God expects. And that is why Paul then says, put aside, present your bodies as a living sacrifice. There's a sense of urgency, this sense of this is what is a right response to God's mercy, to what God has done for you. And as I've said, and this is going to be so important because with so much of Scripture, it is so easy just to kind of pick out the do's and the don'ts. You know, do this, don't do that. Do this, don't do that. And all you're left with is naked, ugly list of rules that become a burden. And worse yet, become a basis for legalism as we pick and choose that which we want to obey. But as I said last week, this is not just about ethics. It's about a statement of our hope. It's an anticipation of resurrection, that we are getting ready for glory. And so Paul is simply saying, listen, this is the natural response. The person who has been saved from death is filled with great desire to respond to the person who saved them. So he says, present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Now, the believers in Jesus' time thought it was really strange that we would take a piece of bread, the Christians would take a piece of bread and this, not because of this, they didn't know the actual what was used so much as they heard the words of Jesus, which said, you got to drink my blood and eat my body. And they thought, oh boy, these are carnivores. Not carnivores, they're cannibals. Cannibals, yes. And so they thought that was weird. But what was also weird was the Christians no longer sacrificed. The Christians did not offer sacrifices. And in the religions of the time, including in Judaism, sacrifices were an integral part of worship. And with Jesus, sacrifice was switched from being an actual physical sacrifice of an animal to a sacrifice of one's whole self. Just as Jesus sacrificed his whole being and body to his Father and for us, so now we are invited to do the same. As a living sacrifice, holy. Holy simply means pure, set apart. Called, as we're going to be looking at, called for a purpose. Well-pleasing to God. Whose sacrifice was not well-pleasing in Scripture? Anyone stab in the dark? Cain. Bingo! 10 points for... Is that Jane? Jane, did you say that? Yeah. 10 points for you. Cain. Cain came to his sacrifice with a heart that was not really for God. And it was not well-pleasing. But we are invited to bring ourselves as a well-pleasing sacrifice to God, all that we are. And by the way, that word body, I forgot to say that. That is not our physical body. The word there for body very simply means our whole person. So all that you are, every single bit of who you are, we'll be looking at that later on, but what that means, but every single bit of who I am is what it means to bring before God. Including your body, yeah. And then Paul just says, because this is your reasonable and spiritual worship. Now, why is it our reasonable and spiritual worship? Very simply, why? Because of what?
God's mercy.
God's mercy, exactly. In other words, this is just the natural response. Again, the next time you think, every time you see someone on the news who have been saved from death, from certain death by someone, and you watch their response to the person who saved them. Let it be a reminder to you that that is the natural response that we should have toward God, and even more so. So what does that look like? Do not be molded to this age. In other words, do not be shaped. I was in Vancouver again this week, in Vancouver, Canada, not Washington. And I really enjoy going down there, downtown, and I get to do a lot of people observing. And it's such a different life. It's such a different world. And again, one of the things you realize is, wow, people dress really fancy, and there's all these fancy shops, and there's a lot, just the dynamics. And I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, how much of my life is molded by what the world says is important? Then we watched some of the movies, the movie awards and the Grammys, and you watch and you listen, and you go, how much of my life is shaped and molded?
Much less than Midway.
Much less than Midway, yeah, exactly. And yet, because of social media, because of the internet, it's amazing how much molded people even in Africa are, or other remote areas where they don't have that connection. Even in Midway, Fred.
We don't have TV, Mark.
You don't have TV. But be transformed. Be changed, Paul says. Okay? See, very simply, we are invited as followers of Christ to be changed. And I think a lot of us fail to recognize that. I was all into transformation when I was younger. I'm older now, I'm not so much into transformation. I'm getting stuck in the rut. You know that? And it's amazing how I'm starting to justify some of my unwillingness to change in my life. And yet, I still am called to be transformed. In fact, even more so as I get older. And here's how I am transformed. By renewing your mind. The mind. How I think. How I process things. Speaking to someone this week who had a very difficult ambulance call, one of my former employees, and she phoned me to talk to me about it because she was pretty upset about it. And as I just went over the series of events, as I first heard the story, and then asked her some questions, and everything I heard was that she had done a really good job on this call that did not turn out well. And I went to her and over the phone, I said, so why is it that you're holding on to the fear of what didn't happen, what you didn't do, rather than resting in the fact that you gave this person the best chance possible? And you can be proud of the fact that you followed what you were trained to do. And we talked for probably 20 minutes going around in circles to that, right? Keep coming back. Just keep coming back to everything. Her mind just kept telling her everything that she could have done wrong, that she and never resting in the fact that from all that we knew, she actually could be resting in the fact that she'd be proud of what she